appreciate you coming on today and sharing some of your input, some of your opinions, just talking a little bit about the world of MMA.
Yeah, definitely, man. Always happy to do podcasts and stuff like that. I've seen yours. I seen you were speaking to. I seen you were talking smack with Mac. So yeah, he's a great guy. So yeah, when you asked me to do it, I was like, yeah, let's do it, man. Always happy to.
Yeah, it was funny talking to him because I feel like we have kind of a little bit of the same experience when it comes to sports and just growing up around them and that kind of thing. And I really haven't talked to anybody like that in such a long time. Just being out of school, not being, especially I guess with COVID maybe too, not being around people, too many people, and then it just kind of like brought those memories back. It was kind of cool.
Yeah, definitely. That's good. Are you in America as well?
Yeah, yeah,
Go, man.
yeah, yep. And you said you were from Scotland.
Yeah, Scotland.
Scotland.
Staying in Glasgow just now, but I'm originally from Edinburgh, which is the capital of Scotland, for anyone who didn't know.
What is it kind of like where you are? Like, what's the environment like?
Like with the COVID restrictions and stuff.
Just like not even with COVID, just like growing up. What was it like? And then kind of where you are now, city wise, big city, small town. Like, what was it like?
Yeah, I guess growing up in Edinburgh, I didn't really have anything to compare it to. So everything that happened there was just considered to be normal. Once I got a little bit older, started going to different cities, I could see there was little bits of differences in the people and like how they treated each other, the places that I could go to and stuff like that. Yeah, Edinburgh's pretty cool, but it was good to kind of step outside the box, go to Glasgow and just kind of meet some of the people there. It's a wee bit different. People a little bit. It has its ups and its downs. They're both. It's good. It's still quite similar because it's still Scotland. You know, it's not all that different. It's not like going to Australia or New Zealand or America or anything like that. So it's still pretty similar. But yeah, I like it.
Gotcha. I've always been curious about that kind of thing and getting to talk to people from around the world. It's been cool to kind of hear a little bit about just the cultural differences. Like I learned something about Canada just the other day, and I mean, it's not like it's that close, but it's like right there. It's right on the border, and I never knew this thing, and it was like, oh wow, it's just like such a cultural difference that it's minuscule, but it's just one of those things that you never would know unless you get to interact with people from there.
Yeah, well, I guess if you've never been to Scotland, a lot of people think it's very beautiful. Edinburgh, particularly, is quite historical. So you've got Edinburgh Castle, which is a castle that's built on top of a extinct volcano. There's loads of like old Victorian kind of like cobbled streets, really old fashioned bars. And like I say, it's very historical. Glasgow, it's a little bit different. A lot of the buildings are a bit more modern and things like that. So I guess that's kind of the main difference. Edinburgh's the capital, so the city's looked after a lot better. Glasgow, it's not too bad, but some areas definitely need a lot more attention.
Do you appreciate that kind of thing, like that history and everything, or does it kind of just like, I guess maybe living there, you don't necessarily like know any different kind of thing? Because like in America, especially these days, everything is so questioned history wise. Everything is so put on this platter of like evil kind of deal, like bad intentions. And then we just don't have that much history, really, to be honest with you.
Yeah, because yeah, the US is quite new. I think growing up, because it was just kind of what I was brought into, I didn't appreciate it to the extent maybe I could have. But growing up as an adult and things like that, and moving out of that city where there's not as much historical sort of buildings and landmarks and stuff like that, it makes me appreciate it because not everywhere has that. It's always cool when I meet people that aren't from Scotland or outside of the United Kingdom to take them to these cool places, and it's things that they usually haven't seen before. Kind of what it was like for me going to Barcelona and seeing all the churches and things like that. If you're born in Barcelona and grew up there, I guess that's nothing new to you. Maybe seeing a castle on top of a volcano might blow your mind. So it's just one of those things. But yeah, as I get older, I definitely have more of an appreciation for it.
Yeah, I feel like that's one thing people here, especially those people who don't travel, can't travel, whatever, they don't have that appreciation for like time, you know? Because it seems like here in America, it's just like, oh, the world's 300 years old because America's 300 years old, you know? And People don't
Yeah.
have that long-term view of what actually went down in the world a lot of times. I feel like it's so cool to be able to live in a place that has that history and that like, and even now everybody knows history is not for the faint of heart. Like bad things happen, people were, treated bad, but it still existed and it still pushed us to where we are today. And I feel like we're trying to like erase that here in America. Do you feel like there's any guilt or trying to erase some history like in the UK at all?
I think there's a lot of change going on just now. There's been a lot of learning over the last decade or so, even longer than that. We're always learning as a species, in terms of sort of forgetting about it. I definitely think some of the things that have happened in history shouldn't have happened, and it'd be great to forget about them. But at the same time, we can't in a way, because some of the repercussions are still happening in these times.
Yeah, I feel like there's just so much to learn from understanding and knowing just what happened before. Getting to kind of more into you, if you want to kind of introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you, who you are, and we'll, I guess, roll into more of the podcast topics.
Yeah, sure, man. So my name's Liam. I run an MMA page on Instagram called MMAHardcore with my brother. We also have a YouTube channel as well, MMA Hardcore. We've been doing that. I've had the page for probably about 3-4 years now, maybe a little bit longer. Kind of lost count. Have to go back to like the first post to actually check sometimes. But yeah, I've been doing that for a while now. I'm also in a band called The Painkillers. We make rock music. We're a band in Glasgow who met in August 2019. So we've been bringing out some music, and you can listen to us on Spotify and things like that. And yeah, as far as me, I like to stay fit. I like to spend time doing what I'm passionate about and hang out with people that are like me and also are passionate about things as well,
So how did you get into the world of MMA? Was it from an early age? Is it something that kind of just struck you? How did that happen?
Well, when I was younger, I was always into fighting and like Mike Tyson and martial arts and stuff like that. I used to be fascinated with Bruce Lee as a young boy. I used to love watching his films, and I was such a fan. He always had that kind of mystical like presence about him, and I was definitely drawn to that. Started doing Taekwondo because one of the things he used to do was Taekwondo. So my brother used to do that, but he stopped. So I thought I would give it a try, and I went, and I quite liked it. I liked the exercise, and obviously being able to punch and kick, even just like pads and stuff like that, was really, really good. I had a really good teacher. And then I did that from about, I don't know, I must have been about, say, 14 or 15 to probably like 19 or something like that, where I would stop, 19 or 20. Yeah. And then I kind of stopped. I moved from Edinburgh to Glasgow, started working. And it was actually Conor McGregor when he started kind of building his name. I think it was when he was fighting Jose Aldo. I kind of started getting back into watching. Well, I never really watched MMA too much. I usually just liked the martial arts sort of side. But when Conor McGregor was coming up, I kind of got drawn back into watching it. And he had that kind of mystical presence as well, a bit like Bruce Lee, where he was like knocking people out. He had kind of that touch of death, people would say. And I found that really appealing. And then I watched the Conor McGregor Nate Diaz fight. And Nate stopped him using jiu-jitsu. So I started to do jiu-jitsu again. I thought it was time to get back into a martial art, and I wanted to keep fit. So I started doing jiu-jitsu. I did that for about a year and a half. And then now I'm just a fan, I don't participate in any kind of fighting or sparring or anything like that. I'm just a fan of the sport. I'm a fan of the people that do the actual real life fighting and stuff like that. I think it's really cool. But for me, no, I'm definitely a spectator.
So do you feel like even with a little bit of experience you have with like jujitsu and then obviously a few years of other kind of martial arts, do you feel like you get a better grasp on when you do watch it than maybe the average fan does?
Yeah, I think anyone that's trained in any type of martial art or sports where there's like, yeah, even boxing, they can definitely appreciate different skills that the fighters have and their movements and things like that. I'll be able to see, like studying jiu-jitsu before I did that, I didn't really know what was going on the ground, what they were kind of working towards. And I think if you watch it a lot, you'll maybe get an understanding to some extent. But by doing it, you can definitely see where they're kind of going with it and stuff like that. And there's definitely more of an appreciation, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like when I've never trained. I want to train, but I've never done it. But when I first started watching like UFC a little bit, it didn't really like click with me at all, other than just like the stand up stuff, because that's like everybody knows like you punch and you maybe kick too. Like that's just like even an average fight's what's gonna go down. But so I think people get that a little bit more, but it really like even even when I watched a fight, when I like knew the fighter or something and I was interested, it was just kind of like boring to me. Oh, they're on the ground, they're doing, whatever they're doing, because you just don't know, like I said, unless you have that experience. But do you think that's maybe why boxing is maybe not as, I wouldn't say as popular as UFC, but do you think that's why boxing maybe is a little bit more like relatable or like maybe watchable? Or some people think UFC is so much more violent than boxing, but do you think that's like that has something to do with it? Just people kind of get punching more than they do other movements?
Yeah, I think people watch it for the entertainment. There's a lot of punching, obviously, in boxing. There is only strikes to the body, to the head, in movements. So it's quite a lot of action in that. And if there's knockouts, that's great. People want to be entertained at the end of the day. People that are coming to watch a UFC, obviously, it's a bit different. Whereas in boxing, there's only striking, but in the UFC, there is definitely striking, and you can use your legs as well as your elbows. But obviously, a component of martial arts is wrestling and jiu-jitsu as well, and they come into play. So some people may get turned off by the wrestling, or can't keep up with, they don't really understand what's going on in terms of the jiu-jitsu, but that's just part of the sport, I think if you like it, you like it. And if you don't, you don't. It's kind of like baseball or American football, with the rules and stuff, if you like it, you'll learn the rules and you'll understand what's going on. It's kind of the same for MMA.
Yeah, I feel like fighting is one of those things that a lot of people don't get into early, and then they might like get into the UFC and then they start it up. I feel like it's kind of unique in that way, where a lot of people don't start just playing basketball or football or soccer or whatever, but they will start to maybe like do a little bit of MMA in their life.
Well, there's definitely a jump, isn't there, from like playing soccer or snooker or swimming or something like that, going into martial arts. I think studying martial arts and training to become a UFC fighter are like two different things, though. Some schools as well are definitely more geared towards family environments, and some schools are geared towards training people to be professional fighters. It just depends on what you want to do and what your character is. I think you could probably start out in both and move to the other, but you'll find out what's right for you as time goes by.
So you really didn't get too interested in like the UFC until like 2015, 2016?
Yeah, just around when Connor was fighting Aldo, and then sort of had his, like when he fought Nate, that's when I got really like interested in it, and I started to see how, like, the striker with the amazing boxing could just be taken down and strangled basically, and I thought that was really interesting, and I wanted to see what it was like to train that martial art. So that's kind of what brought me back into it. And then just with the fights continuing to keep going, the Conor McGregor hype train was just keep it on rolling, with him fighting Diaz again, and then fighting Alvarez, and then fighting Mayweather, and then coming back fighting Khabib. It was always that. So he drew me in. And when I started hearing about Nate, I'd look into his brother, Nick, and I started to see all the like old fights, Diego Sanchez and Clay Guida and all these old fighters, John Jones, George St. Pierre. I loved watching all the guys, and I realized that this sport's been like well on the go, well before Conor McGregor. It has this history. The Iceman, Chuck Liddell, there's loads of all these fighters, and it was good to go back and watch all the old fights and see what it was about and see how it had evolved into what it is today. And yeah, it's incredible.
Kind of talking about that evolution a little bit, do you think that, or how do you think that it's really kind of evolved as far as just like in the octagon itself, not so much necessarily like outside, because I think it's changed there too, but how do you think it's evolved just in, the fighting itself?
Yeah, well, I think when you look back at the early days of the UFC, it was just a lot of tough guys, entering, who maybe weren't skilled they weren't highly skilled in martial arts or anything like that, and they would just use their kind of toughness. But it was only a matter of time until someone came along who was skilled and trained the martial art and knew the art of fighting. I think was it Hoist Gracie was one of the like early champions, and you can see how it's kind of came from like a tough man background where it would be like strikers and stuff like that. But throughout time, there's like all the different types of martial arts have got involved. And that striker would need to learn how to wrestle, and that wrestler would need to learn how to strike, and the striker would need to know jiu-jitsu and etc. etc. And as time has went on, the training's obviously got a lot better for martial artists and stuff like that, especially if they're getting geared towards being professional fighters. It's not as if they're just learning one thing nowadays. Nowadays, you can go to MMA classes and learn mixed martial arts and how, like UFC fighting, like how to clench, how to wrestle, how to do jiu-jitsu, how to strike, how to throw knees. So I think as times went on, the fighters have got a lot better, and the sport's evolved. You can't just get away with being a tough guy and biting down on your mouthpiece anymore, because someone's gonna wrestle you and tire you out till your arms are heavy, and then what are you gonna do? So yeah,
I think an interesting point you just kind of made or brought up was like the fighters keep getting better and better. Do you think that we've seen maybe like the best natural potential fighter, whereas maybe they haven't had that same training as we have today? Or do you think like the best is like still yet to come, or do you think it's already here? Where do you think that's at?
I think the best only, you can only really say like a fighter at one point. George St. Pierre was the best at that time. And then now, if you look at who's the champion at 170 is like Kamaru Usman. Like he's the best at this time. And eventually, as time goes by, there'll be another best at this time. There'll be another best at this time. And the level just gets higher and higher and higher and higher as time goes by. So in terms of like, is there a best ever yet? Like there is, and they're the current champions. But are they the best that we're ever going to see? I don't think so, because I think the sport's always going to evolve. And if it wasn't for those guys, it wouldn't. So yeah, they're definitely the best just now, but there will be better in the future, and it could even be better versions of themselves. Like George St. Pierre went away after defending the belt for so many years, and then came back and then won the middleweight belt. And he beat one of the best fighters in that division, Michael Bisping, because he was the champion. He knocked out Luke Rockhold and won the belt. George St. Pierre comes back, beats him. So it shows you, like, even though he was a great fighter then, he continued to train and become a better version of himself to come back and beat Michael Bisping. So yeah. And who's to say if he was to come back again, it might be even better.
So do you think that the UFC or the UFC, that it is doing a good job in terms of like keeping or making like mixed martial arts and the competitive side of it? Do you think it's doing, I guess, because like if you look at it, especially American sports, where there's like one league, there's like the top league, like the NFL, the NBA. So with UFC, I guess you would consider that maybe the top, but do you think that the UFC is going to kind of stay the way it is, or do you think it's going to kind of merge with other powers to kind of give more opportunity, have more resources kind of thing?
Do you mean like, is it going to become more of a sports league as opposed to a promotion?
Yeah.
It's tough to say. Like say if you take the NBA or the NFL or anything like that, for example, you notice that the teams have a league, right? And the better you are, the more games you win, you move up the league. And it doesn't really matter who's in your team or how famous the people are in your team for whatever reason. The top are always going to like play against the top to see who is the best and the champion. With the UFC just now, it's a little bit weird where the rankings are kind of made up of like just loads of different components that probably aren't really relevant to finding out who's the best at the sport, where sometimes it has influence over like how popular you are and how much fans you can draw and etc. Payday fights, big money fights. So I'd like to see it become more off sport, where the best fight the best, so then we find out who's definitely who is definitely number one and who deserves a title shot is going to get a title shot, and they're not going to be leapfrogged by someone who is just a big name who's coming back, or a celebrity that's wanting to dip their toe in the water. I don't think that's because you would never, like you say, like you would never see LeBron James playing, I don't know, so like someone like Kevin Hart's never going to play for the Lakers in a real match, is he? Just because he's Kevin Hart, just because it's going to get them views and potentially make them money. It's like, it just won't happen because he'd lose the game, and it just doesn't make sense. I hope the UFC become more of a sporting league as opposed to doing these promotions. As much as I love them, I would kind of try and draw a line between like money fights and like kind of these YouTuber sort of type things, and actually have like a professional league where these are our our best fighters,
Yeah. And I feel like it doesn't, like you kind of mentioned, it doesn't do it justice to the fighters who are maybe not the best promoters, or maybe not, that have the biggest personalities. So it would be cool to have some sort of like tournament or bracketing system to do that.
Yeah, definitely. Because in the long run, it will do them justice, I think. There's Conor McGregor. He definitely took the sport to the next level and things like that. But it only lasts for a certain amount of time. Conor McGregor's always going to make millions, but in terms of the sport, what's the sport going to do? If you have a system where it's leagues like the NHL, MLB, NBA, they have leagues and it's consistent. They play again, and that's what fans are going to always rely on, that league and that system. When you start mixing up things and you start building fighters and they become superstars or whatever, what happens when they lose, and all the kind of structure disappears, and that's not good. I think building it as a sport, that should be first. And obviously we can have fun with these big fights now and again, but because what happens is the champions then start only looking for money fights. And obviously it gets into a whole different thing, because of course the fighter should be paid. They should be paid money fights where they're like the best in the world. And that's something also the UFC need to work on. There should be maybe a different way of how they pay their fighters and stuff like that. It shouldn't be treated more as a promotion, whereas it should be treated as a sport. And these athletes should definitely be getting paid what they're owed.
It does feel almost like some sort of popularity contest. And then, like you said, whenever those popular people lose, it almost sets you back a little bit, because then you have to build up this new person who's winning, and then that takes time. And I guess it's just because it kind of is like so new still. I mean, really, if you think about it, it's so new. They're just, I guess, trying to figure it out, because it's and maybe you and it's hard to compare it to even like single athlete sports, because like you can go out and play golf, or you can go out and do a tennis match and then do one the next day too if you want to. But it's hard to do that with fighting, obviously, because you're going to potentially get hurt, or you're going to be exhausted. You need to recover and kind of go through that physical change as well again to get ready.
And this is like something as well where it's like, even the fighters, that's what I'm saying, the fighters should definitely be paid what they're owed, because if they're, the goal's to be a champion, right, to be the best in the world, to test yourself. If they're only getting paid, say, like 50 grand or 100 grand to like fight and win against the best in the world and put themselves through all that challenge, all that adversity, whereas they're going to get like 2 or 3 million for fighting like a YouTuber, it's quite obvious what they're going to do. They have to be smart about it. Like you say, they can only fight a few times a year. What do they want to do? What's the reason they're fighting, really? And that's why they have to have it in terms of like, there has to be structure. There has to be some type of legitimacy in the rankings and stuff like that. And they should be getting like well compensated for what they're doing. Because if they're not gonna, they will start looking elsewhere, and it just won't be what it should be.
So you started watching, you said you started watching in 2015-16 timeframe when McGregor started kind of getting bigger, but I remember I never watched it really as a kid, but I just remember my friend's dad actually had it on one time, and I remember him watching it, and then just people talking about it a little bit. And it was almost like it was this like gladiator, it had this super violent theme to it. Like people were just like almost turned like repulsed by you thinking about it and watching it and everything.
Yeah.
Why do you think that that's maybe gone away a little bit, that kind of stigma?
And I used to think like that as well. I remember being a kid and seeing it on TV real late at night, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, to be like some fight promotion I never even heard of. And it would just be two guys fighting, and I'd watch it and it would be so violent. And it was something I'd never seen before. I think going from that, and it was called cage fighting, and it was just, yeah, I guess never really being exposed to that, not really seeing it as like a martial artist type thing. I think as it's evolved, it become more of a sport. And obviously with the UFC and stuff like that, where they use the gloves, it's in a cage, there's a referee, everything seems to be quite professional. It's hard to dress it up, but like I say, back in the day, it was a lot of people that weren't really that skilled at fighting, and they were just really tough guys, and the fights would be often quite ugly and quite brutal, and it would just be a lot of punching, a lot of punishment. And yeah, like that's not really what we want to see. You don't want to see two people just like basically kill each other. You want to see a skilled bout between two individuals, like displaying skills like martial arts. And I think over the years, the martial arts has definitely crept in a lot more, and we're seeing that. So you get to see a lot more skill now, and it's not, sometimes it can be pretty brutal, but sometimes it's also really skillful, and we can see that it's more of a martial artist point of view now, as opposed to like a street brawl in a cage. It's definitely different.
Yeah. Do you think that, and I kind of got this feeling today, actually, for whatever reason. But do you feel like it used to be, when you watch those older fights, it used to like it was almost let to be a little bit more violent by like the ref and everything. It just kind of, it feels like today they call things maybe so soon, or just sooner than they would have in the past. Do you think that's maybe part of it too, is to help the image?
I think as well, it's just with experience. It's not been around that long, so we know what people can take and what they can't take. There's definitely been fights in the past where it should have been stopped a lot sooner, but there's also been fights in the past where they've not stopped it, and that person's ended up winning the fight. I think nowadays it's definitely better for the fighter because they're not taking any unnecessary damage. It's like watching boxing. As soon as the guy starts taking a few punches and stuff, and he can get stopped quite quick. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing, though. I think that's a real good thing. An example of that would be Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder. I'm glad that got stopped. I didn't want to see Deontay take any more punishment, and now we can hopefully train and come back and fight him again, But if it had went longer than that, who's to say what would have happened? So I think it's always better to stop it sooner rather than later in general.
I agree with that, definitely as far as the athletes, what's the word I'm looking for? Interest.
Their safety.
Yeah. And I think that too helps bring in potentially more athletes to it, because it's not like they have this fear of, if I go in this thing, am I going to come out kind of deal,
Yeah. Am I going to die or anything like that? Yeah. It's like there's not a lot of fighters I don't think have really died. I think you definitely do get brain damage and you do get concussed, and CTE is real. I believe in fighters and stuff. You keep getting hit to the head, it's got to do something. So yeah, it's just about seeing that person's a lot more skilled. This isn't going to change, and stopping the fight a lot sooner. Yeah, that's good. It's a good thing there's referees for sure.
So do you think when it comes to like fighters, and it's hard to like, you can't know, because it just depends on the skill level of each individual fighter, but does someone with a ground game, do you think they have more of an advantage in the UFC than somebody who's more stand up?
It just depends on the fighter. And who they're fighting. I think probably just being a good wrestler is probably the key skill to have, really, because it's in between the ground and stand up. Habib, obviously the best example of that. But then again, George St. Pierre as well used to just wrestle people and keep them on the ground and tire them out and beat on them. So I think also it just depends who you're fighting, It depends who you're fighting. I think it's good to be skilled in all those areas just in case. But when you get people that are specifically really good at one thing, like Habib with his wrestling, like Stylebender with his striking, like Damien Maya with his jiu-jitsu, it can it depends, you know, because like, oh, if he gets on the ground, then it's really bad for me, but so I need to keep it standing up. And that guy's like, well, if you keep standing up, it's bad for me, so I need to get it to the ground. So wrestling obviously is the main thing. So I think if you're a good wrestler, you can control where it goes, kind of.
What's your opinion on like fighters choosing a fight, like being able to choose their fights, like not from the perspective of like, is it good or bad, but do you feel like a lot of fighters don't necessarily get respect within the UFC from other fighters because of the fights they might choose to take?
I don't know. I don't really know how much like option really. I don't really know if the fighters actually get to choose who they fight unless you're like Conor McGregor. You know, I think the UFC offer you fights based on where you are in the rankings and what they think is going to sell. If you're doing quite a big name, they can maybe build you up, but I don't think they get a lot of choice in terms of who they fight. Obviously, they have the managers and stuff like that, but yeah, it does it affect the fighters' opinions on other fighters depending on who they choose to fight? Of course, it does. If you look at like Justin Gaethje, he's fought everyone that they've put in front of him, and he's, you know, went to war. He's won some, he's lost some, and yeah, like for someone like Conor McGregor, I know they kind of have a little bit of beef where it's like, yeah, he's not really legitimate. He's only fought, like Conor McGregor's only fought 2 or 3 times at 155. He's not, he just got a straight up title shot. He went away and then he came back, got another title shot, got beat, came back, fought Dustin, got beat. And it's like, if Conor McGregor fights for the belt, you've got guys like Justin Gaethje where he will criticize Conor and say, well, why does he deserve a title shot? No, he's only fought 3 times and he's lost twice. The last guy he beat was Eddie Alvarez. He didn't hold the belt for very long. I thought, you know what I mean? He got beat, was his first title defense or whatever. So it's like, yeah, I think it definitely, fighters do have an opinion on that, especially when you are fighting your way to the top, like these guys.
So do you think, we were talking about before where it's not so much like a league, do you think that plays a role in us knowing, you know, how good a fighter truly is?
Yeah, if you don't get, yeah, of course. If the best teams don't play the best teams, we don't know who's the best. If the best fighters don't fight the best fighters, we don't know who's the best.
You started watching UFC and you made your Instagram page. What was your motivation behind doing that?
Just for fun, you know, just for fun. I was enjoying it. I enjoyed talking about it with people. I enjoyed going to training, and I began to notice, you know, there wasn't a lot of people that were really into it like me, but I would be online, you know. So I started to like build a page on Instagram, and I started to post like my own training stuff as well. And I began to get following, and I could start to speak with people about like MMA online and stuff like that. And even now, I still love interacting with people sometimes in the comments. It's quite fun.
At what point did you really start to like see your page grow? Was it kind of like an overnight thing, or did it take time to really build it up?
It takes time. It took a lot of time. Started off just posting like, you know, sort of pictures of like Connor and stuff like that, try and get like talk chat and stuff like that. I would follow people on his page so they'd follow me back, and then, you know what I'm saying, they would see my posts and like stuff that I would try and put as much original content. So like I have original things that people would comment on, videos of me cycling or running or working out or eating healthy or just putting a motivational quote on and building a bit of engagement. And I think just like anything, man, you know, if you're just consistent enough and believe in what you're doing, results will come. And slowly but surely they have. And now we have like different opportunities and stuff, like to do podcasts and work with sponsors and just like, you know, shout out people on the page that deserve it. And yeah, we've actually interviewed like a couple fighters. I had Josh Emmett on the podcast not even that long ago. Hopefully we're going to be getting Diego Sanchez on soon, and we just kind of take it from there. I just do it because it's fun. It's something I enjoy to do. I try not to focus too much on, you know, is it going to be successful or not? Obviously it's good if it does, but the most important part's the journey, you know?
Yeah. Getting back into UFC specifically, one thing that kind of holds me back, honestly, from like being more engaged with it is the pay-per-view aspect.
Yeah.
Do you think that that's holding the sport back, or do you think that's just something they're willing to deal with?
Yeah. That's a really good question, man. And Yeah, that's completely true. It definitely is. See, being in the UK and trying to watch it, it's a nightmare. I have to pay for Sky. I have to then pay for a channel on Sky. And then I need to pay for extra to get the fight. So I'm paying for Sky, which I don't really watch. I don't really watch that much like normal TV. So I pay for Sky, then I have to pay for that channel specifically on Sky. Then even though I have that, when there's a fight, I still need to pay extra for that. It's like, no, I'm not going to do that. Or like, it's just a nightmare. Whereas with boxing and all these kind of new platforms where it's as simple as I just pay the money, £10 or £20 or £30, whatever it is, and I just get it. And it's as simple as that. That's how the UFC should do it. If I was the UFC, I would keep it how they're going on, like ESPN. Like have normal fight cards, like the fight nights and stuff like that, and they'll build the fighters and stuff like that. But see, when the champions are fighting and things like that's when they could do pay-per-view. That's when it could be pay-per-view, and you could take some of the fighters that are doing really well on the fight night cards and put them underneath, so they get a percentage of the pay as well. So they are working towards something, and they do get paid higher. That's what I would do for sure. But you need to do something about the way the UK viewers are meant to watch it, because just now it's just all over the place. And I think that's why a lot of people are just streaming it, not because we don't want to pay for it, just because it's an absolute nightmare to pay for it. And a lot of these people are kids, a lot of these people aren't going to get their mum and dad to subscribe to Sky and pay for that channel and then pay on top of that. And they're paying over the months as well. It's not as if you can just pay for 1 month. It's not like that. So it's like a contract. It sucks. But if they go to their mum and dads and say, can we watch that fight tonight? It's £20. My friends come over. Like, yeah, of course they will. So I'm sure Dana White knows that. And he'll have people telling him. And I think it's probably just contracts that he's tied into just now. But hopefully it changes and things are get a bit easier for the people in the UK to watch the fights.
Yeah, I think a big thing you mentioned was like just the kid aspect. Like most kids get into sports at such an early age, and that kind of like defines the sports that they're into for their life. And it could definitely be a huge turning point for the sport's popularity if they could figure out a way to make it more accessible to like the I guess 10 to 18 population or whatever it is before you can kind of do that stuff on your own.
Yeah, exactly.
I think you associate other sports so much with watching it on TV. It's weird because it's like the athletes are just almost like entertainment people. They're not even just like people because you see them on TV so much. But I almost feel like with the UFC, and maybe it's because it's a smaller community too, it feels like those people, the athletes in that sport, are just almost more. You can reach out to them a little bit. You can interact with them. Maybe they feel more just like individuals than they do.
It's just because it's so new, like in the NBA and stuff like that, all had to be built. The people in the NBA had to be put in the papers and get social media kind of like behind them in terms of newspapers and sports magazines and stuff like that. Nowadays, it's all online, and it is kind of in our own hands a little bit, And like we always have the outliers like Conor McGregor, who just used that platform to just build his brand and shoot off into the stars. And I think there's definitely a lot of pressure now on the fighters to do that. And it's not just about the fighting. Like you say, it's about building the brand and getting their name out there and making big money fights. So yeah, it's like it'll balance itself out eventually. It can't keep going like this, but because the UFC is so young, it's one of the things where it's kind of just finding its way. Now it's on ESPN, which is fantastic. The pay-per-views are still going on, which is good because like boxing, the pay-per-views are sell. That's what get the fighters the money. But we just need to wait and see what happens. And hopefully it all works out for the best. I'm sure it will. I think they're going to be a successful business. They've got the formula. They know what they're doing. If they just pay the fighters a little bit more money, it's not going to do them any harm. I don't think, if anything, it will probably make the fans appreciate things a little bit more and support the sport a bit more, as well, knowing that the money's going to the fighters and they're getting a cut and things like that. So, yeah, we'll just have to wait and see, but I'm sure it'll all work out eventually.
Where do you see maybe some big changes coming for the UFC or for professional fighting in general?
Yeah. I think they have to get like the payment system kind of organized a bit better, where the fighters are getting paid what they're worth. So I think we'll definitely see some changes in terms of that, hopefully. In terms of the whole money fight and like people skipping depending on their social media following and things like that, hopefully that kind of dies out a little bit. You know, as much as I love seeing people like make big money fights and stuff like that, if you're going to think of it in terms of a sport, it needs to have some type of legitimacy. And the longer we do these big money fights where it's like this person fighting that person, but they're not really ranked, or they're ranked quite low, but they're getting a title shot anyway, it's like, it just kind of confuses things and it mucks up the system, because, you know, sometimes if that person wins the belt, they're not going to defend it against number one contender. And it's just kind of like gets all over the place. Hopefully they iron that out a little bit. But at the same time, I also like seeing these big fights, the money fights, and the fights that are a wee bit like, oh, what's going to happen? Yeah, like people going up weight divisions and stuff like that, people coming back to fight for the title. So I think there's definitely a way to do it, but we just have to kind of wait and see what happens. That's something I would like to see change within the next 5 years. And I think that it should become more of a sport within the next 5 years. I think a lot of people are going to get behind it more. It's going to become more popular than it is. But yeah, we need to start seeing like good things coming from the UFC in terms of how they're paying and how they're treating their athletes and stuff like that. I think I'd like to see that a lot more and have it a little bit more professional. But that's the goal. That's where I'd say I'd like to see it within the next 5 years.
Moving to like an individual athlete, do you have maybe that person, that young fighter who you kind of have your eye on of maybe being up and comer?
The next 5 years.
Maybe sooner than that, maybe like 1, 2, 3 years.
Yeah, I think Sean O'Malley, I really like that guy, you know. I think his last performance was awesome. He's got his confidence right back under him, and you know, to knock that guy down and then just like want to keep the fight going because he wanted to like do it again. I think he beat him twice in that fight, and you know, it wasn't that long ago that we seen Cody Garbrandt fighting him, and fair enough, to be fair, Cody knocked him out as well, but that's definitely someone the UFC is building, and him being so young and putting in so much work and time, give him a couple of years. I think he'll be a champion if he sticks at it and is determined enough, you know. But we'll find out when he fights Dominic Cruz or Cody Garbrandt or someone like that. But he's got time. He's one of the new kids that grew up watching it and then implemented it and got the good training from like young and grew up. So this one of the up and coming people for sure. We'll have to see Sean O'Malley fight someone in the top 2 or 3 and see how he does. But over time, I think he's one to definitely watch.
Yeah, he's an interesting person as well. He's definitely got that personality and that flair to him for sure.
Yeah, he knows what he's doing. He's a cool guy. He's cool. He's always making it interesting inside the octagon and outside. And as a fight fan, it's good to keep up to date. Follow him on social media, and he's always posting funny videos, training, and just having banter, you know, just being fun and being a likable person and relatable. So yeah, hopefully he does quite well. I believe he'll do quite cool things if he sticks with it and sticks to the right path.
I think that's such a big aspect to fighting too, is the outside interaction, because like you don't get to see your favorite fighter like every weekend, you know, like you do with other sports, or every, you know, couple days. Like in basketball, you might get to see LeBron play every third day, but you know, in fighting, it might be months in between their fight.
Yeah, he's really good at it. But yeah, he's definitely one. In terms of other people that are up and comers, there's a few people. I think some of these Russian fighters, I think 2-3 years, you'll probably see them become champions and be quite dominant and things like that, because they're kind of just mingling into the UFC a little bit now. So we'll give that some time and we'll see how it goes. But who's to say? Who's to say? It's the fight game after all. Anything can happen.
Yeah.
They have like iron will, where it's like, you know, it's just a different human, isn't it? Habib raised in the Russian mountains, and you know, they're just tough, strong people. And they're very determined. So yeah, I think we'll see a lot of them coming into UFC and building. And like I say, they're mingling now. A couple of years' time, probably be a couple champions.
Yeah. And it's funny, the evolution of the whole thing, because like right now it seems like so many, like in Africa you have, or out of Africa, you have all these great fighters right now. And then, You know, it could be Russia in a few years. It could be, you know, after that, who knows who it could be. It's just, it's kind of cool to see that
Africa as well.
evolution.
That's a good point. So you've got Russia, but you've also got 3 African champions just now. You've got Kamara Usman, you've got Izzy, Israel Adesanya, and Ngannou. So if they do a fight card in Africa, you know, that would be insane. Have them all on the fight card, and that'll inspire even a younger a generation of fighters from Africa. But yeah, I mean, they'll definitely be on the cards. That's 3 they've got already, so I wouldn't be surprised if there was more. And like you say, with the Russians and everything, Americans are tough. We've got fighters here in Scotland that are in the UFC as well, so it's so cool. Brazil as well, they used to have a lot of champions because of Brazilian jiu-jitsu and stuff like that. So yeah, it's just going to keep rolling, and we'll just have to see what happens.
I think one of the cool parts about the UFC too is the women's side, how it's just like maybe not equally as big, but it's like equally, it's right there in front of you when
It's there. Yeah,
it's there. You know, it's not like some other women's sports to where it's on a different time or a different day. It's like, oh, it's right here. We're going to watch it because it's on. And then you get to know like the fighters, you get to see them, whereas you might not get to see the other, you know, other female athletes as much.
yeah. So you can definitely get to see the fighters, like the male and the female, on the same card, which is really cool. They kind of built up the UFC, built up the women's fighting and stuff like that with Ronda Rousey, and now I've got Amanda Nunes. I've got Miesha Tate coming back, which is someone from the old days, like watching. She's fought Amanda, she's fought Ronda, so yeah, that's she's fought Holly Holmes. So that'll be good to see her come back as well. And yeah, they make it just equally as exciting, don't they? Because they're all treated the same. They all get on the embedded episodes. You get to see their personality, follow them on social media, can watch their fights. And some of them are really exciting, you know. I wouldn't want to mess with some of these women.
Absolutely not. None of them. I think it's really cool to see it too, just the acceptance of it. You know, I think it's just, I think a cultural shift a little bit, but just the acceptance of women out there, you know, beating on each other is crazy, honestly, a little bit to watch.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I guess it's always been males that have been a wee bit more aggressive throughout history, you know, so to see women be so aggressive in fight, it's definitely something new to the eyes if you've not seen it before.
It's really cool how they've done that for sure. But yeah, man, I really do appreciate your time today.
Yeah, man, it's great. And like I say, I'm always happy to come on and chat to you. You know, Mac as well. He's a cool guy. Well, thank you very much, Daniel, for having me on. It's been a pleasure, man.